go back to is actually factoring, but we're going to actually use it for something, not just to factor for the sake of factoring. So, we're going to solve quadratic equations. Now, a quadratic equation has the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals y usually, but we'll put a 0 there. So in order to get to solve this, we're going to have to use the 0 property. And the 0 property tells us anything times 0 is what?
0.
Yeah. Alright, so let's use the 0 property right now. If I tell you a times b equals 0, not a, 0, one of these would have to be what?
0.
Yeah. One of those would have to be 0. So my answer would be a equals 0 or b equals 0. One of those would have to be true. Or both of them. They both would be true. 0 times 0 is 0. So we're going to use that to solve. So let's say I have the equation x plus 5 times 2x minus 6 equals 0. Now notice these two things are being multiplied. I don't want to actually multiply them because either this is 0 or this is 0. So I'm going to say x plus 5 equals 0 or 2x minus 6 equals 0. So that means x equals negative 5 or x equals 2x equals 6, divide by 2, x is 3. So that gives me two answers. Negative 5 or 3.
How did you get x plus 5 and that stuff? Is this all another
This is an example.
Okay, so it's a
Okay, so I gave that to you.
Why is it negative 5?
Yeah.
Okay,
Is it because...
let's go back up here. Either A is 0 or B is 0, right? One of those would have to be 0. So what I'm saying is either this whole thing is 0 or this whole thing is 0. So I set them equal to 0 and solved them.
Yeah, but that still doesn't explain why you got a negative 5.
Yeah, it does.
Because he said minus 5 to the 0, so it's, you know, like...
Oh, I'm dumb.
Either this is 0, so x plus 5 equals 0, or this is 0, 2x minus 6 equals 0, and then I solve them. Subtract 5, x is negative 5, or, and I'm not going to go through all that work again, x is 3.
Okay.
Usually with quadratics, we have the same number of answers as we do the power. So if I have an x squared, I expect 2 answers.
I'm sorry, I'm confused, but why wouldn't the 3 be in there?
I add the 6, and then divide by 2. I showed it down here. Okay. So in this case, it was already factored. Let's do another case where it's already factored. So here's another example. I am definitely not going to want to multiply all these, right? But because in the n that equals 0, I know at least one of these must be 0. So I say x plus 8 could be 0, x minus 4 could be 0, x plus 5, that could be 0, or the 3x plus 8 could be 0. And now I solve all of those. X could be what on the first one?
Negative 8.
And x could be what on the next one?
4.
And x could be what on the next one?
Negative 5.
Now we have a few steps on this one, minus 8. So I get negative 8 and 3x, and then I divide by 3. X could be negative 8 thirds. So I had how many answers?
4.
That one I had 4 answers. But sometimes they are not factored for me. In which case, then I'm going to have to factor it myself. So maybe I have something like this. X squared minus 8x equals 48. Now I have a few problems here. You already know what it's going to be. Trey is jumping ahead here. This is the 0 property. Do I have 0 right here?
No.
No. I must have a 0. So I subtract the 48 first. Everything has to be on one side. So I need a 0 on the right-hand side. If I don't have it there, I need to get it. After I get the 0 there, then, if it's not factored, I factor. So now I'm going to factor this. X, X. Maybe 12 and 4. 12 times 4 is 48. Negative, plus. Don't get stuck. You might have gotten stuck on this one. 6 and 8, but there are other factors, right? And now, after I factor, I set equal to 0. So there's my steps. So x could be, or x minus 12 equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0. You with me? One of these would have to be 0, and then I add the 12, so I have 12, or x is negative 4. Now sometimes there's a faster way. Now what I've just shown you is the usual way, the usual thing that happens, but I want you to recognize that there's a faster way to do something, to go ahead and do it the faster way. So what if I had x plus 4 squared equals 100. Now I could multiply this out, and then I could subtract the 100 over. I could do that, but that's a lot of work. How do I undo a square, do you think? Square root. So I'll square root both sides. Notice how all the stuff was on the parentheses there. So now I need to remember, whenever I square root, there's 2 answers. A plus 1 and a negative 1. So I have x plus 4 could equal, what's the square root of 100? Square root of 100? We should say 10, right? Because 10 times 10 is 100. So the square root of 100 is 10. Or I could have x plus 4 equals negative 10. I get a plus 1 and a minus 1. Now I solve these. Two possible answers. Kind of like with absolute value questions where we had 2 possible answers. Sometimes when we have a square root. Let's do one more of those and see if you can see what we would do. Okay. Notice how all the stuff with x is right there, inside a parenthesis. So when that happens, I can do the shortcut that I just showed you. So what do we do to both sides? Square root. Now the square root undoes the square. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. All right, so the square goes away and I get 2x plus 7. Now what's the square root of 64?
8.
8. But I have 2 possibilities. It could also be negative 8. Now I solve both of them. Subtract my 7. Divide by 2, so x could be a half. It's okay to get fraction, divide by 2, x would be negative 15 halves. Those are my two answers. So remember, whenever you take a root, there's two answers, the plus one and the negative one. All right, let's do a few more where you have to factor. Try these on your own. Give them a shot. While I draw a portrait of someone.
Can you draw it me, please? Oh, let's not discuss now.
What a guy.
Let's do it.
Yep. I hate to do that.
Sarah.
No, my ponytail's higher than that. It's Reagan.
Yeah, it's Reagan.
It's Reagan. Reagan. Reagan's
It's
high.
me.
It Reagan.
Yes.
Is that a blush?
Did you just have
Well, it was supposed to be the
Dark
front,
adult purple?
but they came out really bad.
That is horrifying.
That was, this is zombified Reagan.
Reagan, watch out, be.
I'm gonna make it zombified Reagan.
Oh, man.
My color.
Oh no.
That just looks like. I don't know.
Wait, with an open mouth. Oh.
That?
Okay, so what should we do first on the next one? On the first one, what should we do?
Subtract 42.
42 over there.
So x squared plus x minus 42 equals 0. Now what?
Factor it to the
Factor.
thingies.
Okay, and then 7 and 6. What sign right here?
Plus negative.
And negative 6. So x plus 7 equals 0. X minus 6 equals 0. Subtract the 7. Add the 6. Next one, what should we do first? What do you think we should do first?
Square.
No, I
Make
don't
something
want
a zero.
I get everything to one side, so I'm going to subtract 2x and subtract 21. I must have something on one side, or everything on one side. So I get negative, or 3x squared minus 2x minus 21 equals 0. Then we factor that. Now I need to get a 2 somehow. I'm thinking 7 right here into 3 right here. Because then I get a 9, then I get a 3. So negative 9, positive 7 gives me the negative 2. So I say 3x plus 7 equals 0. And x minus 3 equals 0. Subtract the 7, divide by 3. And add the 3.
What if I got, like, I got x 7 thirds and x.
So that means you messed up your signs up here.
Okay.
So you do have
Does
to...
signs matter?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They absolutely matter. right, we're going to do one more together. Maybe two more, we'll see. Okay, green one. Why not? Three more. That'll be it. Okay, what should we do first on the first one? How do I factor this?
You take out a 5
And an x, right? Always factor out the common thing first, and then I get x plus 5. Now, we haven't seen something quite like this yet. The 5x would have to equal 0, and the x plus 5 would have to equal 0. When I divide by 5, I just get 0. Then I subtract the 5 there, and I get negative 5. So there's my answers. Now, I want you to pay attention to this. What if I had this? 5x plus 25 equals 0. It was close. What could I factor out?
5.
Would I have x plus 5? Now notice, does this one have an x on it?
No.
No. So that one doesn't matter. It has to have an x, or your variable. So it would be just x plus 5 equals 0 and x equals negative 5. So only the parts that involve an x or our variable are going to matter, the rest will not. Alright, how about the next one? What should we do?
Well, x equals 0, and then x equals negative 4.
Yep. 0 and negative 4. And the last one, someone else, walk me through the last one. What should we do? Go ahead, Alexis.
Square it.
Not square it, square root it. Make a square root.
Yeah.
What two answers do we get?
X plus 8 equals 0 and 12.
Not 0, 12.
Yeah.
And x plus 8 equals negative 12.
Yeah.
Then we solve both of those. We get 4, and we get negative 20. So remember, when you take a square root, you get two answers. Okay, I want to just show you one more thing, and then we are done with our notes. Yeah, just one. I promise this is.
What are you doing? Should we go into this like
For who?
examples?
No, I don't think so. Okay.
Now we're going to do this same problem twice. Well, depending upon you. Let's see. What should we do? Trey's not allowed to answer. What should we do?
Yeah.
Okay. Rachel says subtract 12. Rachel is correct. All right. Before we go on, though, look up, look up. Here's what many students do. Many students see this and they jump right to factoring. And they factor this and they get this. Because that factors so nicely. And then we say x plus 3 and x plus 2, that equals 12. And then we say x plus 3 could equal 12. And then we can say x plus 2 equals 12. But there's a big problem. This is not a 0. It must be a 0. There's no 12 property. There's no, because, see, the whole 0 property tells me A times B, if that equals 0, one of these has to be 0. But neither of these have to be 12. I could have 3 and 4. I could have 12 and 1. I could have 2. There's an infinite number of combinations, okay, even fractional ones. The 0 property works because it has to be, one of them has to be 0. Okay, so we subtract the 12. She's correct. So we get x squared plus 5x minus 6. Now that does change how I factor this, right? It's not going to be 3 and 2 now. What is it going to be? X. We did a whole chapter on factoring.
1 and 6.
1 and 6. The 1 is negative and the 6 is positive, which means x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 6 equals 0.
X equals 1, X equals 6.
And we're happy. Yay. All done.